Hello, welcome everyone to our today's session on dev containers with Coder. My name is Bartek. I am a product manager at Coder.
Hi, my name's Danielle. I'm a software engineer at Coda.
Yeah, hello. I'm Eric Paulson. I'm the field CTO for the EMEA region here at Coder, based in London.
Awesome. And welcome everyone who joined us today, of course. Before we dive into the presentation and the demos that we have prepared for today, a quick ask. Please do ask questions in the chat of this webinar. We'll be answering them as we go. And also we have a frequently asked question section at the end of the presentation. So hopefully by the end of this session, you will have answers to the questions that you have. All right. The first thing that we are going to do today is to take a look at the dev containers, what they are and how they came to be, a little bit of history. And we will do this before we will bite into the combination of dev containers and Coder and how these two technologies work together. So what are dev containers? It's a full-featured development environment created alongside the source code of the project on which the developers are working on. And the purpose of this development environment, or in fact the definition, is to make sure that the project runs in ideal environment, or the environment in which it was developed, so that it's consistent, it's portable, it's reproducible across various stages of the development lifecycle, and potentially also later when the project gets the definition of the ideal working environment defined in production, this can also influence this decision and the description. Dev containers were introduced by Microsoft initially within the VS Code tooling around the end of 2010s. However, the formal publication of the spec for the technology was done in early 2022. And again, the motivation was very similar to what I just described. This proverbial "it works on my machine. I don't know how to reproduce the error. Everything is fine." This is the core motivation behind creation of this specification. And through its own existence, the dev containers actually solve a bunch of very frustrating problems. This, basically eliminates the frustration related to the incompatibility of the environment and the project itself, all the edge cases that might appear if the project is run or developed in semi-official environment. This is how the dev containers actually, this is why they were created in the first place. Not only through the development process, the benefits expand also later into the CI/CD stages, and it's just a lot of time being saved and a lot of frustration being saved if one decides to use such an approach to dealing with the project, and potentially if the project is also very dynamic in its nature. So this is kind of like this is an outline of where it came from, and what problems they solve. And we are going to now jump to Danielle's machine. She's going to show you the first demo of the solution. The first demo focuses solely on the dev containers without the coder in the picture yet. We are going to get to those a little bit later. So Danielle, the stage is yours.
Yep. So dev container specification details that you have a dev container JSON file. In this dev container JSON file, there's a whole range of options that you can put. In this case, we're just saying the most minimal example. We've got a Docker file option, give it the path of the Docker file. And in here, we're using one of Microsoft's provided base dev container images. It's running on Alpine. And then here I've just got a command that I can have run to install some software. So if we check, I have this version of Jiu-Jitsu installed. But if I wanted to change this development environment, I can just comment that out and then hit rebuild container. And it will reopen VS Code, rebuild the dev container. And now that command's not there. So this just lets you have a development environment where you can easily change the software that's installed, all just in a small definition. Yeah, so that's what a dev container is and how it works in VS Code.
Right. Thanks, Daniel. So this is, let's call it a vanilla setup where everything just works within within the VS Code. Now, where is my browser? Where's my browser? There it is. I hope you see the slide again.
Yes.
All right. So now let's think of dev containers and Coder combined, how these two technologies coexist together. If you look at the problem definition, what Coder solves and what dev containers solve, these problems actually overlap. So let's see at this, proverbial developer and the quote from this person. As a developer, I want my environment to align with the project I'm working on so that I and other contributors can save time and effort and all the frustration on the configuration and basically save time and frustration. So there are different strategies to address this need. Dev containers do this by the definition of a container environment. Coder does it through a cloud development environments. But the thing is that these two strategies, while they actually overlap when it comes to the problem definition, they are not mutually exclusive, and it's actually the other way around. They can supplement each other really well. So now let's take a look at the same situation, but when we see two personas, we see the IT admin, someone who takes care of the whole development environment in a given company or a given organization, and the developer. So IT admin says, I need to have control over these environments because of the security regulations, because of the consistency, repeatability. I want to control this potential chaos. And developer says, I still need the workspaces to work well with my projects. And my projects are very dynamic. They change all the time. The requirements for the environment change all the time. So how do we meet? How do we make sure that while there is a consistency and security and all of that, we also have a comfortable working environment for our projects? So this is where the combination of Coder and dev containers, this is where this combination becomes very, very important, because you can actually use both. You can, the IT admin who typically controls the environments from Coder perspective, the cloud development environments, can agree to use dev containers alongside or within the workspaces during the development process. Eric, I believe this one is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Bartek. So yes, in addition to having a consistent set of development environments across your company, right? There is a need to foster collaboration amongst individual developers as well as software engineering teams. And so the ability to quickly reproduce an environment from a known specification that is codified as well, likely stored in Git, makes it much easier for these teams to test out different feature branches that they're working on and collaborate with each other by launching that environment from a consistent standard. Additionally, what I've seen in the field as well is while Coder enables and CDEs generally enable platform teams and developer experience teams to control the blueprints for these workspaces, whether they're defined in Terraform or as a Docker image. Those platform teams being a bottleneck to make changes for teams to iterate on their development environments becomes a problem, right? These platform teams aren't large enough. They don't have the bandwidth to submit a bump of a Python version for a specific team or a new dependency installation. So what we've seen in the market is that there's a need for more of a self-service developer experience when it comes to iterating on your workspace. And so with the full control of the Docker file that the dev container spec allows for, an individual engineer such as myself or others could make a change to their Docker file in the workspace in that repository without having to wait for a ServiceNow ticket to be queued and completed. And then as well, I mentioned a feature branch a bit earlier, right? So having dev containers that spin up an environment on a per branch basis allows for specific dependencies and environment variables to be run that are relevant for that work that is going on in that particular branch.
Thanks, Eric. So now the question that you probably have is how all of this works. How does Coder work with dev containers? And in order to answer this question, we need to take a look at the Coder architecture, actually at maybe the bottom half of this diagram. By the way, this diagram comes from our official documentation, so you can also read through this documentation the description of all the building blocks that you can see here. But as you can see at the bottom half of the screen, we have workspaces. And workspaces are those environments in which developers spend time. This is where they work on the code. And you can see 3 examples here of workspaces on Kubernetes, on Docker, and within virtual machines. Of course, behind the scenes, this can be any form of virtual environment, can be provided by a cloud provider or hosted on your own within even air-gapped environments. So, this is basically the Coder is at its basics. And then developers connect to such environments using their preferred IDE. So this is kind of the core of where the magic of development happens. Now, when the workspace is created, you want to attach your repository to it. You want to attach your development project to it. And this project of course, it consists of your source files. It may have some additional files in it. And if it happens to be enhanced with a dev container definition, it is going to also have a JSON file called dev container JSON. And this file represents the description of an ideal environment and the description of a container in which the development process should be performed. I have used this example of a Kubernetes workspace on the right of this diagram. It doesn't have to be that way. Of course, it's just an example of illustration. So we have at Coder right now, we have 2 possible scenarios for supporting dev container definition impacting the workspace of the developers. Scenario number 1 is something that existed already for some time within Coder, is where the dev container definition actually redefines the whole workspace. So your workspace becomes a dev container in a way. And I'm going to explain it a little bit more in a moment. Scenario number 2 is something that we have added just recently to Coder within our July launch of 2025. It's where the dev container works within the workspace. So there is actually a container running within the workspace itself, and the developers can connect to this container and work on the project. So we have these 2 scenarios, and you might have been familiar with the name Envbuilder already. This is actually what scenario number 1 is. Envbuilder is the name of a project or a functionality within Coder that allows for the first scenario. The second approach is what we call automatic integration. I have added this, new in brackets because it's a relatively new addition to our feature set. And both of these scenarios have the same goal to allow the developers to, benefit from a dynamic definition of the work environment, but they achieve the goal from a technical perspective through almost completely different methods. I mentioned this already. Envbuilder is available since late 2024. Automatic integration was introduced in July 2025. So just keep in mind that they both coexist at the same time. And with that said, let's dive a little bit deeper and take a look at how Envbuilder scenario works. This is the one that was available for some time already. So on this slide, you see the steps performed within Coder that allow for the Envbuilder to work, or actually for the developers to get the workspace that is represented by a dev container file. So it all starts by fetching the repository from GitHub where the dev container JSON is. Then we generate the Docker file from the dev container JSON. And then we build the image inside of this dev container. And important thing is that this image actually becomes the workspace. This is the original workspace that you would have received through the process of Terraform now is being formatted to contain everything that the dev container JSON definition contains. So we are using the project called Canico to assist with this process. We start with an empty container. We unpack all the content of the Docker of the Docker file into the root repository. We run the instructions and update the caches. And at the end of this process of building of such a workspace, in this case, we run the entry point script that allows all the initializations. And this is also where the coder agent is added on top of everything. So this is, you might say, a modification to the dev container definition file, because the coder agent is very unlikely to be part of the definition. Once this happens, you actually end up with a workspace that has been created according to a dev container specification. And Danielle is going to show us the second demo right now, explaining and showing how this process is performed from the configuration all the way to Coder UI at the end of the process.
Yeah, thanks, Bartek. So the first part that we're going to look at is, what does the template look like from Coder's perspective here? It's quite complex because the way that we're transforming an existing workspace. So we have this Envbuilder, a bunch of Envbuilder environment variables specifying the initialization script, etc. In this case, it's running inside of a Docker container. For this demo, where it runs isn't particularly important, but for the sake of this, it's running in a Docker container. And so if we then look at the workspace, we can see that this if you're used to the Coder UI, this looks like any other workspace. We'll take a look at the logs quickly for when this workspace was started up. And you can see the Envbuilder is running here. It takes the URL of the Git repository, we download it, and then we build the dev container into this workspace. So it's doing some mounts here, whether it needs to mount them or not. We retrieve the image, we execute it, and then we extract all the layers, run some commands, and then that is what the workspace is. And I have VS Code opened here into this workspace. Now, again, like the demo earlier, I could show that I have Jujitsu installed. But if I were to go into the Docker file and, comment that out, because this isn't actually a dev container, it's just a dev container that's been unpacked into an existing workspace. There is no VS Code feature here for reopening in a container or rebuild the container. We'll have to restart the container, so the workspace, from scratch, and then it will build it again. So it gives you the flexibility of being able to configure your workspace's dependencies, so what software is installed. But at the point of wanting to use it more like a proper dev container, it starts to show a bit of the abstraction breaking. So yeah, if I were to go over here, we can hit restart, and then it will boot this back up and reinstall it without Jujitsu installed. Um, Yeah, and then another disadvantage is we can't have multiple dev containers running in the same workspace because it is the workspace. So, you can only have that one. And you see, we've got it started up. It's now building it. This shouldn't take too long.
Yeah, and as this builds, Danielle, something I'd like to add is Envbuilder here is typically used by our customers who are in high security environments and they need to run the dev container process in more of a rootless fashion without access to a Docker socket in a virtualized environment like a VM or even a Kubernetes deployment. So that's typically the use case that we see in the field.
Yeah. Because this obviously is completely separate to containers. This doesn't have to be ran in a Docker container like I am. It can be ran in a containerless fashion. As you can see, JJ not found. So that's the demo for Envbuilder. Back to you, Bartek.
Yeah, I'm curious before we go back, how long, in the worst case scenario, it can take for such a workspace to be rebuilt if you change a dev container?
It can take multiple minutes. Because it's requiring a full workspace restart, it will tear down all of the existing compute infrastructure, and then you have to bring it all back up again and then unpack the dev container. So if you have a fairly large dev container, it can take quite a while for that restart process to happen.
Okay, okay. So this is the maybe a disadvantage of this approach, especially for those cases where the definition of a dev container happens to be changing every now and then. So yeah, we have attempted to summarize the most important pros and cons of Envbuilder. So what Eric mentioned already on the pros side, it doesn't require to run in a separate container and doesn't require privileged containers in the first place. So this is a very welcome property of this functionality, very welcome by those customers who are concerned about security and operate maybe in some regulated environments too. On the con side, the changes require the whole workspace to be rebuilt. This is what we have seen on the demo. It may take up to a few minutes. It only allows one dev container to be running within the workspace because it is a workspace. It basically takes over the workspace as the definition takes over the workspace. It is a little bit more complex when it comes to the modifications of the existing templates. If you wanted to add the dev container support to the templates that were not previously enabled to allow for Envbuilder, I'm sorry, it requires the Envbuilder block and certain environment variables to be added. And this is not, it's not maybe a tremendously a complex process, but the alternative that I'm going to present in a moment is a little bit easier. Because in this situation, the workspace is taken over by the dev container, you might say. It is also not separated from the dev container. So there is certain limitation. There are certain limitations in applicability for maybe AI agents or continuous integration scenarios where you want a very high isolation from the workspace just to control the potential damage that is going on. There is no full compatibility with dev container CLI standard. So we can do only as much in this scenario, you might say. It's not a full container, and consequently, if the standard evolves, this ability to mimic the dev container might be impacted, and there are certain edge cases where the solution is not performing to its fullest today. And what finally, what Daniel mentioned also, it may be a bit slow in some cases, depending also, of course, on the complexity of the dev container and what needs to happen behind the scenes. All right, so moving on, where does dev container fit? What is the applicability of it in terms of its highest usefulness? So we mentioned this already, high security requirements, non-privileged setups, not running any additional Docker instances. But the flip side is that the workspace becomes a dev container, so it's not, encapsulated, it's not separated properly. And from the developer perspective, because of the rebuild times required for the whole workspace, if you are operating with a project that has a very high dynamics of the dev container definition itself, probably Envbuilder is not the best choice in this case. All right. There was a webinar on the topic of Envbuilder recorded in February this year with coders Kyle Carberry and Aaron Lemon from Netflix. I think it's a tremendous source of information, and also looks at the Netflix own story and journey through implementing dev containers in their environment. So I highly encourage you to take a look, listen to this session. There are fantastic questions also asked by the audience of this webinar. I mentioned that there is a second scenario, so let's take a look at scenario number 2, the fully automatic integration, which we have added in July 2025. It does work in a slightly different way. It starts relatively similarly. We take the repository from GitHub. However, if it is an optional step, if you have your code already in the workspace, then this step is not necessary. Then what happens is that the system detects the presence or changes of dev container definition files in the project that you have, and also it detects the running dev containers. It starts the dev containers based on the precise dev container definition using the very dev container CLI for this purpose. So this is fully compatible with the standard. This is doing it exactly as the standard describes, running the dev containers as containers using the dev container CLI. It doesn't matter to the system where the Docker daemon is running, as long as the socket is available. And we are going to go back to this topic because this requirement of having a Docker socket available is a showstopper for some of the companies, some of the environments where the security standards prevent from such a scenario to be available. Then once the container, dev container is running, the coder agent is injected into it, and then coder agent performs the detection and exposure of all the ports and applications running within the dev container to the developer. So developer can connect to this or another dev container. We are going to see that in a second. And then kind of the loop goes back. So again, the parent workspace and the agent in the parent workspace detects all the changes in the dev containers. So then the process of potentially rebuilding and restarting the dev containers can be streamlined within the workspace itself. So with that said, I'm handing over the microphone to Danielle for the third demo today. And Danielle, the stage is yours.
Yep. So again, we're looking at same VS Code screen, We're in a dev container hosted with, using this new dev container integration. We have Jiu-Jitsu installed again, and we can modify this Docker file. We can rebuild the container. This will take a little bit longer because VS Code, when you do remote workspaces, there's just a bit of latency involved. It's not to do with the speed of the dev containers, but more just VS Code's a bit slow at it. Then we've got access to the CLI again. We can run JJ again, and we can notice that the command's not found. So we've managed to successfully change the definition and see a change in the environment. Now, if we look at this from coder side, we can see here that we have a new kind of design on the workspace view. So we have our dev container, and we have a rebuild button. So we can, from the website, rebuild our dev containers. And then we have our apps here, like we normally do for workspaces. And then if we take a look at the definition of our template, the only thing we've defined here is we've got a dev container CLI module, which just installs the dev container CLI into the parent workspace so that it can manage these dev containers. And then we have a dev container resource. Now, this resource is not required. This just lets it know ahead of the coder agent know ahead of time where to find dev containers. But there is supported that the agent can search the file structure for any dev containers, and then optionally, if the dev container has specified it, it can have it auto start. Now that functionality can be completely disabled if you don't want that happening, but that's supported. And another nice thing about this new approach of having the dev containers running inside a workspace is that we can have multiple. So I could go in here, not that one, into the parent workspace.
Maybe it's worth mentioning here that the developer in this scenario can independently connect to the parent workspace as well as all the detected dev containers within. So we have seen only one right now, but if there are more of them detected, the developer could connect to them independently for whatever reason they might have during the process.
Yeah. So while Bartek was talking, I just started up another dev container, this time using the dev container CLI. So I've not touched Coda at all. But if we go to the website, we will see that this other container has been picked up and we have access to it. And we could open it up in VS Code if we wanted to and start developing in it. So again, this is multiple dev containers. There's no requirement on just the one. And yeah, so this is having multiple dev containers. And now if I were to start a server running in either of these containers, which I'm hoping shouldn't be too difficult, although my internet is being slow. I think, Bartek, if you want to carry on while I get this running, I've got some
Of course,
slow
this
internet.
this is a demo syndrome, so of course nothing works as expected during the demo process, especially if it's a live demo. So let's continue with the slides, and Daniel, let me know when you're ready, and we'll go back. All right, so that was demo number 3, showing the new automation. Let's take a look at the pros and cons of this approach. So in this case, the rebuilds of the dev containers are much faster. I hope you have captured this moment where Daniel has pressed the button rebuild, because that was a very fast process. You don't have to build the whole workspace in this case, just the Docker, the Docker container where according to the dev container definition. So it's as fast as Docker allows, basically. We can have multiple dev containers running and being detected and restarted with their own individual life cycles at the same time within a single workspace. The modification of the template for the workspace is also very simple. In the simplest possible scenario, the admin just basically says, I want to allow the dev containers to be launched within that workspace. That's kind of equivalent to the change. No specific configuration needs to happen. There is a better isolation because these are containers. So basically, we benefit from the container philosophy here a little bit better. And we are using dev container CLI behind the scenes. So that means that we are very high, there's a very high compatibility with the dev container standard, which means there are fewer risks of it becoming, obsolete in time. On the con side, and this is very important. This is I mentioned this earlier. This may be a showstopper for many deployments. Showstopper for using this particular approach, not for using dev containers. As I mentioned, we still have Envbuilder as our second choice, but it does require a Docker socket. So for those organizations that do frown upon or are basically prohibited from using such setups where there is a Docker socket exposed within the workspace where the dev containers can work, this is basically the end of a discussion. Depending on the type of workspaces, this may lead also to this container in container setups, which is also frowned upon. But again, you win some, you lose some, right? You win in the area of flexibility and speed, but it comes with the cost of extra permissions to the system, if you will.
I've got an extent of the demo working. Again, internet issues,
Okay.
I do apologize. But
All right, back to you then.
share my screen. So in this terminal, you see I've got a Python HTTP server running. And if we go onto the UI here, we can see that it has detected that there is an open port. Node's running a port somewhere. I can't see, I know what that is, but with Python 3, this port we're running is there. Now, I could click on it normally and show you it running, but for whatever reason, my internet is not having it. But yeah, so we can detect running ports in a dev container, and it's accessible. If you use Coder Connect, you can use there's a special URL that you can use to connect into your workspace. That fully works. It's just like a regular workspace in that sense. If you're using our Coder Connect application. But yeah, just wanted to show that.
Awesome, thank you. So back to the slide deck. All right, so we have covered the pros and cons of this new automatic integration. And now the question, where or in which situations it is mostly applicable. So this is, again, another way of looking at the same list. If the admin is more liberal when it comes to the dev container setups, and if they don't want to worry about potential canicos, struggles, or developers complaining about the workspaces taking too long to being rebuilt, this is the ideal solution. It's faster. It's more automatic. Actually, requires less effort to set it up, but it comes with the cost of allowing for the dev containers to be run as containers, basically. All right. So that concludes the technical side of things. I know that we are going to share this presentation for the participants afterwards. So this slide contains a number of additional resources that you might want to take a look at, both from the coder perspective. I also want to mention that we, for those who do not know about it, we do have a feature called Coder Registry that lists all the potential modules that you can use within your Terraform file, the template itself for the workspaces. It makes it so much easier to build your templates with the registry. The prior dev container webinar with Netflix that I have mentioned is also linked here. A couple of blog posts on this topic, and two additional resources. So the first one is a Discord feedback channel, which I strongly encourage you to take a look at and say hi to us, post any additional questions that you might have. And the dev container official file, official site from Microsoft where the definition of the standard lives, and which is used by us to update the solutions, that the two approaches that we have. That leads me to the summary slide, where I just wanted to kind of quickly go through the topics that we have covered. Dev containers give the developers more freedom in evolving the environment requirements for their projects without consulting this all the time and without asking the IT managers all the time to help to allow them to build basically their own environments accordingly. The dev container standard is evolving and is being adopted. It's a relatively new standard. It's 3 years old, but we see from our numbers that it's being picked up by many of our users and customers. So yeah, we are absolutely dedicated to continue supporting this. Integration of the dev containers within Coder workspaces help both of these audiences, both the admins, they have less work, and developers, because they can control the environments to their liking. So it's actually a win-win scenario, of course, provided that they both agree on the approach here. We do have those two ways of supporting dev containers that we have mentioned and demonstrated through the slides. And then finally, dev containers are actually a better fit, in our opinion, for cloud development environments than local machines, given first of all, the limitations, but also the ephemeral nature of the project's evolutions and dynamics, and the fact that in the modern world, developers operate typically on multiple projects at the same time. So just being able to do this and seamlessly switch between the projects with a retention of the full control of the environment is a huge win. All right, with that said, let's switch over to frequently asked questions. Some of these we are being asked quite frequently. And another reminder, please also ask all the other questions in the chat as we go. So the first question is, what are the technical requirements for the automatic integration, runtimes, resources, etc.? We mentioned this already. In any case, there's always a Coder documentation that explains this and has the examples of the templates exactly showing what you need to do. But to reiterate again, we need a runtime socket for the Docker so that the dev containers could be launched within the workspaces, and a very simple change within the template file itself that tells Coder that the dev containers are allowed to be launched and detected. So a very simple module to be added, and the ability to launch the containers within. For those users who are currently using Envbuilder, do they need to migrate to the new integration? I think the fair answer is that if you are happy today with the way how it works, then you're going to be better off just not touching this. You know, if it works, don't try to improve it, because you might just as well break it. Especially if you are a customer who is more focused on the security side of things, Envbuilder is probably a better option for you moving on. Is Envbuilder deprecated? No. You might get such an impression by just observing the evolution of our support. We have added yet another option to support dev containers within workspaces. Envbuilder is not going anywhere anytime soon. It's an alternative option for environments that, as I mentioned already a few times, operate in more security restricted setups. As long as our customers are going to use the Envbuilder, we are going to be continuing supporting this. With having said that, I want to mention one aspect of this. I mentioned the project called Canico, which we are using behind the scenes. This project actually got deprecated by Google. It's an open source project. We do have our own fork of it, and we are maintaining it to the best of our skills. And I mentioned this already, that the dev container specification also evolves. There is a non-zero possibility that at some point in time, the combination of Canico and the whole Envbuilder is not going to be able to handle the complexity and the new features of dev containers. When we get there, we are going to figure out how to do this. And there is, again, a non-zero possibility that Envbuilder is going to be deprecated or evolved into something else. But for the time being, none such decision was made, and nothing like that is kind of pushing us towards such a decision. What to do if I'm not allowed to run containers inside of my workspaces? Mentioned this already a few times. Envbuilder is probably the best choice for you if you want to use dev containers. Is Coder planning to support dev containers in future? Yes, we are. Again, this is going to be based on our own observations and the adoption of this standard. It gets a very reasonable adoption right now, and this adoption is growing. And as long as it's growing, and as long as it makes sense to continue to support such combination of Coder and dev containers, we are going to support it as well. If we come to a point where a decision to discontinue needs to be made, we are going to announce it way ahead of time. For now, nothing seems to be pointing in that direction, so don't worry. And that brings me to the final slide. And again, please talk to us. We have provided this link to the Discord feedback channel of Coder. Please, say hi. Tell us about your deployments of dev containers and your, adventures with it. Maybe some struggles. We are learning from our users, and we want to make sure that our solution is as best as we can possibly make it. Such stories help us tremendously to build the right solution for you in the future iterations. Danielle, Eric, any final words from you?
Nothing from me.
Yeah, nothing on my end. Looking forward to addressing the questions in chat, and thank you all for your time today.
Yeah,
Right.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.